Hey everyone, welcome to the latest edition of Paddock P, which is essentially our take on the latest our take on the weekend's race. Latest of which is the race in Portimao around the Algarve International Circuit. With me today, I have our fabled guests, BlackSheep, who you are no stranger to, and Couple, who is again a core member of IRC and the podcast team as well. So, hey guys.
Hello.
Yo,
Thanks for
So,
having us.
what do you think of the race yesterday? Apart from the craziness that was lap one, we'll get into it. But what were some of your highlights from the race yesterday? Let's start with you, Couple.
I'm just happy that a fast flowing circuit finally finds its rightful place back on the F1 calendar. I mean, I saw the chat going around in IRC yesterday, and I absolutely agree with everyone that this should really be the the replacement for Catalonia. So that's like my first takeaway that yes, we've got a proper race on our hands on a proper racetrack. On the race itself, awesome first few laps. I mean, I was losing my mind. We'll get back to that in a minute. But the entire race in itself, with all its quirks, really was a treat to watch.
Could agree more. Black Sheep, what about you?
Um, Very track heavy, and what I mean by that is, I think the nature of the circuit dictates very much as to what kind of race we were going to have. I think I was hearing a lot of people talk about, oh, it's not going to be a good race. Not many places to overtake. There's only one DRS straight and so on. But I think if we don't focus on the aspect of how many overtakes there were, it's just cars driving through that circuit, how they negotiated those corners, how drivers performed. That in itself was just pure joy to watch. There were a couple of bits of wheel-to-wheel racing, thoroughly enjoyable. The track is wide enough to allow for that, which is fantastic, and I couldn't agree more with Couple
Yeah.
in terms of I think a track like this definitely should find its place in the calendar.
You know what? I agree with all of your points, except for what Couple said about the fact that it's a fast flowing circuit. I don't think that is what actually made the racing good. It's actually the slow corners and the heavy stress on the tires which really sold the circuit for me, because the slightest shift in tire performance between two drivers meant that drivers could get so much closer. And because of the slow speed corners, Dirty I didn't play too much of an effect as it would in like some of the faster paced, like for example the Magnussen Beckett section in Silverstone. You can't really follow a car on the ass through there. But I think the slower speed corners, the varying levels of duration through the lap, it's a beauty to watch yesterday's race for so many different aspects. And the moment there was a slight shift in tire performance, you'd see an insane difference of pace. Like for example, you saw Bottas overtaking Hamilton in the first few laps, and I think that probably can get us into our first point. And Bottas started the race incredibly well. I mean, the get off the line was pretty shit, but if you look at
He
the
had a
way,
lot of wheel spin, I think, off the line.
yeah, he nearly
I mean, so much was that it was visible. It was very visible.
his car almost was 90 degrees to the left. I was like, what is he doing?
Yeah,
And then I'm like, yes, Leclerc's gonna jump him, but then even Leclerc bogged down. But anyway, he had a pretty poor start of the line, and but in lap one, he came back at Hamilton. I mean, that was a real show of intent for him. But
yep.
again, do you think that um, do you think he could have done anything better through the race, or do you think just Hamilton was just too good for him?
Um, I'm not too sure. I mean, he himself said that he didn't have the pace. Kind of evident because Hamilton just was on the groove, in his own groove yesterday. Kind of definitely showed on his part. But coming back to the race start, the I actually would really like to see the formation lap in detail because that played an amazingly vital role in the race start itself. Because I don't know if everyone was taking it really seriously, but I can for sure say that Kimi took it really seriously, and he had that that masterclass of a start. So I'm really curious to see whether Bottas did the same. I mean, definitely both the Mercedes simply did not get in enough of a wear or temperature into the tires, and it really showed in lap one. But
Yeah, they were on the mediums as well.
yeah, they were on the mediums as well, so it was really difficult on them. Um, I don't know. It's a disappointing start for him, but I don't think it would have changed all too much given the track nature at the end of it.
Yeah. Um, Interesting you talk about formation lap. So I was sort of watching, sort of half watching some of the post-race driver interviews yesterday, and I have to say, Carlos Sainz, he came on and he said he was very, very focused on that formation lap, and he said he knew that was going to be super, super important. He wanted to make sure that he had the temperature in the tires, all of that good stuff, and that really showed.
Yeah,
He
he
took the
kept
lead
complimenting.
before the end of the first lap.
Yep. He was complimenting the weather so much, saying that this is his zone, and his dad was especially proud of him for a crazy start, and that's what they trained or lived for. So that was a very nice reaction from
Yeah.
him.
I was really hoping it'd stay ahead for a little bit longer. I would love to see a future Ferrari driver really take the fight to the Mercedes drivers in a McLaren, which let's say isn't on the same level right now, but it was a
Never
McLaren.
say never.
Hopefully, McLaren Mercedes comes back with a nice silver and black and takes the fight to Mercedes.
Yes.
But anyway, yeah, I think. But if you look at that first lap and coming back to Bottas, he did push Verstappen a little wide, and I think that in turn had a Constantina effect, and Verstappen uh, just understeered into Perez into turn five, I believe, or turn four. Uh, Stewards call that NFA. Lot of conflicting views around the paddock. But what did you guys think? I personally felt Verstappen definitely was to blame. There was no way that it was an NFA for me.
Yeah, it definitely looked like. I kind of agree with you. It did look like he was determined to keep that position, and then he just floored it on the exit of turn three. And because of that lack of grip, he did understeer into Perez. That's how I'm seeing it, at least. Perez did nothing wrong. Like, he positioned himself perfectly. He was alongside. He left the room. There's absolutely no way you can fault Perez for any of this. But yeah, it's kind of, I don't know. Maybe awkwardly they took it as a lap one incident, as a little too slightly, if I may.
Yeah, but if you just want to compare it in terms of just actual and talking about the brilliance of FIA consistency, if you look at Leclerc in Suzuka last season, completely Leclerc's fault. Turn one, spoon curve, understeered into Verstappen. Identical incident. Verstappen goes spinning out. Not much damage, and actually no visible damage to either car. I mean, in fact,
Oh, wait,
Verstappen came.
Perez had damage, right? He had to pit.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, yeah. Sorry, so
He
sorry.
was in the wall. Yeah.
So my point
but
is that
actually,
it was
yeah,
actually a worse incident than Leclerc versus Verstappen in Suzuka, and yet it was no further action by the steward. So, and I think Verstappen had a screamer. I mean, first lap to forget. I can't. My brain's malfunctioning. But he had a lap one to forget. He first goes completely wide at turn one. He's okay, fine. Gets forced off the track by Bottas. Takes Perez out. Goes wide into the next corner. And while rejoining, if Sainz did not take evasive action, he would have swiped off Sainz's front wing and possibly gotten himself a puncture to boot as well. Did you guys notice that at the exit of turn five?
Yep.
yeah.
That was horrendous. I think
Yep, I
Verstappen
did.
showed a bit of his older self, but at the same time, you got to give the guy a bit of a break. I mean, he's been very mature for very long, but evidently people do show their true colors once in a while.
Oh, that's nice.
I'm,
Oh, he's shown some maturity, so it's allowed that he can be a bit immature.
no, I'm just messing around. It's
Kids these
Now, one
days.
thing I'm going to mention is I'm not sure if I'm correct on this, but if I remember correctly, watching Verstappen's onboard when he's sort of driven out of the circuit at the exit of turn three by Bottas, when he's approaching turn four, the uphill, he doesn't seem to even glance to his right to check the mirrors for any oncoming traffic, um, which I think led him to simply just drive as if there was no one around him.
but that still would be classified as his mistake.
Yeah.
No, I'm agreeing with you. I
Okay,
think that's what I'm saying.
okay,
And I
okay.
think his intent was he was probably a bit pissed off at being driven out of the circuit, and he wasn't having any of it. He didn't bother checking who was around him. He didn't even glance into the mirrors. Yeah.
Oh,
Talking about the Verstappen's lockup into turn five, I think that downhill onto the hairpin. I think it's turn five. I could be wrong. It's a new circuit for me, but um, it was like an orchestra of planned lockups because every single car had one lockup
Yep.
after the other. And I was watching lap one again, just watching the highlights of the race, and that was so funny because it was almost like it was orchestrated by the drivers. And I'm obviously not, but it was really funny to watch. It really shows
Well,
how.
David Cock mentioned it on the commentary live, didn't he? He locks up, Bottas locks up, Hamilton locks up, Sainz locks up. I think he mentioned every driver that locked up. And one thing, if I could just plug in there, was Kimi Raikkonen's on board of that corner. He broke so late and no lockup at all.
Was it
yeah.
just
Tip
the
my hat
soft?
off to him.
Was it just the soft tires, or was it Kimi Räikkönen? Because what do you
Why
think?
not
I don't
both?
know. I think he had the temperature and the tires on formation lap to make sure that this didn't happen.
You heard Kimi's opinion on how he keeps temps in his tires, right? Just drive faster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another thing to point out from the Verstappen Perez incident, it's actually um, a very lucky end or aftermath of the crash itself, because it was extremely lucky that Perez, who got hit and had a spin on the right side of the circuit, smoothly spun over to the other side of the circuit. Like, he could have easily just stood there right in the middle of the track, and that could have been a really, really bad crash just waiting to happen. So, kind of very lucky on that part to get away from it unscathed and to go ahead and finish the race as well.
Yeah. We'll get to Perez's. For me,
Yep.
Perez was the driver of the day. At least one of them. I'll give you my final verdict at the end of the session or the conversation. But yeah,
Session. That's how Formula
I'm
One centric we are.
yeah, precisely. I was just gonna say
Yep.
it.
Park Firm is on during the
Yeah.
podcast.
Yep.
Nice. Moving on to Kimi himself, the God Man. Let's all just bow down to his
So
absolutely unbelievable first lap. It was, I could not wipe that smile off my face for the first 10 minutes because his moves were outrageous. I mean, he could not be bothered if someone was slow. He just went ahead and did his thing, and it was so satisfying to watch after such a struggling season that he's been having with his opponent, like getting into terms with the car and all whatnot. He just put all the critics in his place, saying, "Yo, even if it's a hobby of his, he's there on merit alone."
Yeah. The great thing about watching that onboard for me is that it just looks so effortless. It just looks like, yeah, anyone would think of doing that. Anyone would think of placing their car there. That's just natural, right? But
Yeah.
nobody else did. It's just the number of times he's going outside of corners of tight hairpins. And I think that's easily doable, especially on lap one. And a lot of drivers don't do that often, I guess, because you can easily go wider when there's so much traffic. To gain a better exit and do things like that. But I don't know. I was surprised that nobody else was doing anything.
Yeah, I mean, Kimi did say that he was a little surprised. He was at one point he wondered what the other drivers were doing, what the hell they were doing.
Yeah.
But and I kind of agree with that. But I think actually, you mentioned something. I think it was last week or week before last that it was after Monza. Sorry, it was after Monza where you mentioned that Kimi has a way of controlling the cars around him when they're going wheel to wheel, and he shows
Yes.
the drivers respect, and drivers give that respect right back to him. In fact, apart from one particular Red Bull driver who will not be named, I do not remember Kimi making contact with another driver, and even that was not his fault.
Hmm.
Wait, when did you make contact with the Red
Spa
Bull?
2019.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I thought you were talking about yesterday.
No,
Okay.
no, I'm not. I'm
Yeah.
talking about in general.
Okay.
Kimi, and
Historically, okay.
he's always been that, and that battle with Science. Oh my God, I was jumping because it's been so long that we've seen
Exactly.
some old school wheel to wheel action cutback after cutback around the outside. I mean, I was just like, what is going on?
I
I
mean, that
just
just
just the
it's a
track
point to make.
nature bringing out beautiful, beautiful racing.
I don't think it's track nature. I think it's something. It tells quite a lot about where the sport is right now. Where when we find some wheel to wheel racing, it's a reason for us to jump with joy. When I mean, that's how accustomed we are to. Okay, DRS open and overtake down, and that's it. That's we've kind of brought the standard down to that level where, okay, we had one wheel to wheel battle in the race, and now it's worth it. That's a bit sad for me.
No, I completely agree with you. But at the same time, BlackSheep, we've got 2022 regulations to look forward to solve that.
Definitely,
So
definitely,
moving on,
definitely.
onwards and upwards. Um, Another overtake, and I think a stark contrast to Kimi's overtake was Stroll on Lando. Um,
We're there already. Okay.
I'm just okay. So guys, we aren't going to go through driver by driver. Let's just keep to the highlights and just talk about what made the race interesting. What do you guys think?
Yeah, there's
So
no
Hmm.
point in well spilling or no worrying about spoiled milk. So let's just move on to the good stuff.
yeah, I mean, there's no point talking about people like Magnussen because at one point I really forgot he was on the track, and I remember telling my girlfriend, "Oh shit, Magnussen's still racing," and I mean,
Yeah.
he had quite a quiet race, and not a bad thing, but quiet race is a quiet race. But Stroll on Lando, I mean, a lot of people are saying that he was half a car length ahead, but half a car length really isn't enough, is it?
Isn't no. I have two sort of slightly differing views on this. One is that he he sort of went for a move which, if he had pulled it off, would have been one of the moves of the season, definitely. And I don't think there's anything wrong in him going for a move like that. I mean, that's what we want to see, right? Drivers taking risks and going for moves where and when we don't expect them. But I think it's after he made the move or after he was past the car, he turned in aiming for the apex as if there was nobody next to him. He could have just gone that little bit deeper, and that would have been the move of the day for me, easily. So I don't fault him for trying to make that attempt. But I think he should have been. I think he should have learnt a lesson from the day before, and I do think he deserved a penalty for that practice session incident with Max. Absolutely, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
He was reprimanded for that yesterday. I was fuming for that decision for moving late under braking ahead of Pierre Gasly. He was called up to the stewards after the race and he was given an official reprimand.
Oh, it was quite harsh, to be honest.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just looking back at how Gasly and his reaction to it. I mean, if he had he done, had he probably reacted probably a tenth of a second later, it would have been curtains for both of them. So it
yeah.
really did put him at a lot of risk, and probably could have been one of the only positive outcomes, considering the like how close he was and how late that move was made by Perez.
I guess I agree, but I do want to see that, right? I want to see the drivers taking that risk and being that inch
Within the
perfect
limits.
with their precision.
It's you,
Absolutely. And
yeah.
if you keep reprimanding people for this kind of driving, then you sort of demotivate them, and you tell them, okay, if there isn't any opportunity whatsoever to completely overtake somebody, then just don't go for it.
But
Well,
these are the
on
best drivers in the world. If you had to take a risk, I would prefer it if you did it with these drivers versus, let's say, somebody who drives in a circle and call it a sport. Now,
Yeah,
and I think I love Perez's move. It was aggressive, but within the limits. He did not move dangerously either. He certainly asserted his position on track, but made sure that, and it all goes down to control. And a huge part of overtaking is controlling the line of the cars around you. And I think he did that very well.
Kind of disagree there. I mean, there's only a certain limit when you can actually go make your final move. If the car's right up there and then you make that drastic move, you're kind of leaving it to the mercy of the car behind to follow you and to be a good boy. I mean, of course, this is the best pool, to the talent pool that we have on the F1 calendar, and that's kind of why moves like this can even be possible, and you can get away with it unscathed. But I kind of agree with the FIA's decision that, you know what, this is a little too much. You're playing around with the rules a little too much and for their liking, and I kind of agree with that decision.
Yeah, I would disagree. Absolutely disagree.
Yep.
Vehemently disagree.
This
I
is
mean,
turning
if he
this.
had moved twice, if he had done what Grosjean did, for example, at Silverstone, then
Well,
I'd
that's
agree.
blatantly
Because
breaking the law.
yeah,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
then
but
moving as late as possible. Yeah, he's exploring the limits. That's exactly what we want to see, right?
I'm smiling to myself because this is actually sounding a lot like our Stewart discussion at the end of an IRC league race. So I'm thoroughly enjoying this conversation.
well, let's just agree to disagree and move on.
Okay.
But there's no
Yeah.
reason to
As
disagree,
is
I feel.
usually the case, even in our stewards conversation, couple
Yes.
being the
Fair enough. Fair enough. And I think, but talking about, like, I think one, and we've discussed a lot. We've discussed alphas. We've discussed um Perez, the racing points. We've discussed McLaren. I mean, McLaren of Sainz and a bit. But one team who were really missing from the fray in terms of pace, which was very surprising for me, were Renault. They really were off the pace yesterday, and it's not. I think they were off the pace in quali as well. So why do you think their car didn't
Do you
set?
think so?
I think they were off the pace.
I
I
kind of
thought they had
disagree.
good race
Yeah, they
pace.
had.
I thought, I mean, qualifying didn't. I would agree that they were off the pace in qualifying, I guess, the day before, but I think they had good race pace. I mean, imagine Ocon going, what, 54 laps on the same set of mediums, and he still had pace.
Yeah, but if
He
I'm looking
undercut
at
God knows how many drivers.
if
Sorry,
I'm look
overcut.
if I'm looking at Perez on much older tires, matching the race pace of people like, and Ricardo was just dropping back on those used tires. So I think Ocon did recover a little bit, but they finished P
Hmm.
7 and 8 or 8 and 9. I can't recall.
P8 and 9, I think, because Vettel was 10, wasn't it? Wasn't he just ahead of, just behind
Maybe
Ricardo?
the Renault's directive was just to keep those tires because they were all in uncharted territory, and it was actually in hindsight a very wise move not to push them over the edge like how Perez did, and as a result he had to go for that extra stop. But I don't know. It's interesting because both cars did finish in the points. That's not a bad thing in any way. Of course, not characteristic of how Renault have been performing throughout the season, but still a not too shabby result in my eyes.
Yeah, especially considering where they started. They were out of top 10, wasn't it?
No, both of them started on in the top 10.
Did they?
I'm
Yeah,
just gonna fact check
I
that, but
don't.
yeah.
I believe
I thought they were out in Q2, both of them. Were they not? I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
we seem to be mincing our words right now. That's not a good thing. Uh, but kind of swaying the conversation until our facts are being checked. How awesome was Gasly's race? Also, I think, believe started really far behind and just was a soldier in that battle. Like he just
Yeah, as is the
kept.
case usually.
Yep.
So I have checked. Yep, P10, P11 couple. So Ocon started outside the top 10. Ricardo was 10.
Yep. But
Close enough.
and and I think Gasly yesterday really stamped his authority. I mean, he's closed down to Albon within 1 point in the Drivers' Championship. So Albon's on 64 and Gasly's on 63 in Alpha Tauri versus the Red Bull. I mean, people are calling it the season of dreams for
Pierre
for
Gasly, yeah.
Pierre Gasly. But you know what I realized from quali? The Red Bull is not all that quick. And I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me here, but if you look at the pace through qualifying, the McLarens were McLarens and were very close to Red Bull. In fact, I think at one point or after lap one, Lando or Sainz were only a tenth of Verstappen after the first run in quali. Of course, Verstappen picked up from there, but that's Verstappen being Verstappen. I think I think it. I actually feel that the Red Bull is a little overhyped because of the driver sitting in the first seat.
You've got to remember Verstappen did finish about, what, 44, 45 seconds behind Hamilton? So,
That just
yeah.
emphasizes my point as well. The Red Bull is maybe this was the circuit. I think on most tracks the Red Bull at least has half a second on the rest of the field, but not yesterday. Certainly not yesterday.
Mm, I kind of disagree with you there because
Oh, don't get me wrong. I'm saying
still.
Albon is driving shit, but I'm just saying
Oh
that
yeah, absolutely. Like it's night and day that Albon is clearly underperforming and
Yeah.
Verstappen is clearly overperforming. Yeah, I agree with you there. But the car in itself, I don't know what to say because yes, the gap was considerably closer between say Verstappen and the rest of the grid, but there's nothing to take away from the Red Bull themselves. I mean, it could very well be the case that the other cars are really better suited, um, but I don't know. It's yeah, especially considering how far ahead Verstappen finished with that car. I don't know. Maybe it's just that uh, he
Wait, what
has
do you mean
been
how far ahead he finished? He
far
was about,
ahead
what?
from the rest of the grid.
He wasn't too
Leclerc
far
was
ahead of Leclerc.
he was I believe almost 20 seconds. I don't know where I was going with this, but I've just said it anyway. Just
But
do
perfect
what
in
you
the
will.
sense, perfect for what it is. It's not really by any means the perfect car or the perfect
Well,
driver.
no car
Perfect
is
for each other, I guess.
well,
yeah. But
yeah, no car
couple,
is perfect on its
actually,
own. But
let me interject something. I'm looking at actual time. I'm looking at the times in quali. So Sergio Perez was less than a tenth behind Verstappen at the end of Q2. All right, he
Mhm.
was 2.5 tenths behind Verstappen at the end of Q3. Now, if you consider that that Verstappen as a driver would personally be at least 2.5 tenths quicker than Perez in the same car, at least if not more. Do you
I
agree?
can't say that.
I mean,
I
if you,
can't agree with that. I've never seen them duke it
it's
do
purely
it in any
subjective.
category.
It's purely
Yeah.
subjective, but I certainly feel so. You could disagree with me as well. That's fine. I think, and that is Sergio Perez on a good day for me. And if you take away the car advantage, and if you take away that 2.5 tenths, the Red Bull is probably equal to, if not slower than, the Racing Point right now.
Interesting take.
At least around Portimao. Maybe not around other circuits which suit the Red Bull better, but yesterday the Red Bull was not a very good car to drive.
Hmm. BlackSheep, thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I mean, I mentioned about Leclerc being not too far behind. I guess his finishing position was 20 odd seconds, but I think up until the last 15 or 20 laps, I think Leclerc was pretty much in that 10-second or 5 to 10 second window for most of the race.
Maintaining that gap. I think after he pitted,
Yeah,
he was maintaining a 10-second gap, 10 to 11
yeah.
seconds, and was wavering around that for a few laps. And then I think
Oh no, Verstappen did stop again after that, didn't he? Did he have a second pit stop?
no,
No, he
no,
didn't.
Verstappen?
no, both of them on
Oh no,
one
he didn't.
stops.
Okay.
So yeah, they were trading pace until Leclerc, I think, backed off for the final few
Yeah.
laps just to get the car to the end. But either way, yeah, I think, but that doesn't excuse Alex Albon to be lapped by his own teammate. I think you can't do that. You just can't do that,
Yeah.
Braden. And
No, I agree.
yet stay deserving of a seat which should be helping challenge for constructors. Maybe not
Yeah.
this year, but most other years.
So 2 points I'm going to mention there. So no taking away from the fact that yes, Albon really needs to push, and he's probably not doing what the team wants him to do, is to be, the other car on the second row, and then maintain that position. But it certainly also didn't help yesterday when he was pulled in for a second pit stop, which I think was absolutely needless. I think I heard his team radio after the race where he asked, "Why was I stopped again?" And his team pretty much said, "We'll talk about it later." So I'm okay. I don't know what was happening, but this seems to be a bit of a theme, and I think I've pointed out very, very many races we've seen this year where Albon is given a random pit stop for no reason, and I'm kind of sort of half the time wondering why are they doing that. We saw that in Russia, lap one, he was pitted, and he was going right to the end on the same set of tires. I don't know why. I don't know. I keep thinking why the team are making those decisions for him. I don't like. I'm agreeing that yes, he doesn't have the pace at the moment, and he needs to be performing better. But I'm also failing to understand these team calls during race days.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, for sure.
But do you think that because that Red Bull are jeopardizing Albon just to get Verstappen up the grid, like get data for tire data and things like that?
I think so, and I'm not sure who I was I speaking to somebody, or I think it was like the F1 post race show where one of the people there mentioned that I think that's what they're doing. They're pitting Albon onto tires, on new sets of tires, or doing odd pit stops to gather data for Verstappen to decide whether he needs to be pitted or not.
Yeah. Well, I think that's certainly not helping him. But at the same time, Red Bull have their hands tied because he's not getting past traffic as easy as Verstappen would, or even half as easy. He'd just be stuck in
He's
traffic.
not even getting through traffic.
Exactly.
Because
So
it's not even traffic for him. It's just competitors were just faster than him. It's
exactly.
definitely
I
the
don't
case
I don't
against
think
him.
that I don't think this is to do with Albon because we saw when he took over that seat from Gasly from Belgium, and pretty much every race after that, he had a great race day, right? He was easily able to cut through traffic, so I think a part of it is also how that car is built this year.
Yeah.
Could be, yeah. But it's very embarrassing. I mean, me being a Kimi fan and then looking at him battle Albon, I was kind of supporting Albon at one point because I was so sad because he couldn't even get past Kimi in like one of the slowest cars in the grid. And then I don't know, maybe as trying to save face, that's definitely how I saw it. Red Bull brought Albon in to say, you know what, stop embarrassing yourself, just get out in clear
Yeah.
air and make up some time.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, we've been here before, right, with Gasly last year. We felt the
Yeah,
same way for him.
Yeah. I don't know what is happening with that second seat. I don't know why no driver can actually fill that position. Well, maybe Red Bull do need to look outside if replacing Albon is the right choice.
it definitely is. It's this
I
there
don't.
cannot be there cannot be any valid reason for keeping an underperforming second driver.
Yeah, completely agree with you. And I don't think Gasly is the choice. He doesn't. I mean, partly being French and partly being who he is, he's not mentally strong enough to take up that spot. But anyway, that's a joke, guys. That's a joke. Never mind. But either way, I thought we would get to some final like highlights. I think Hamilton breaking the record, and he
Yeah.
outdrove Bottas yesterday on so many fronts, and it's more and more clear that he's better, that he may be the slower driver on raw pace, but he is definitely better as an opportunist in terms of tire conservation, as in racecraft. Everything else, Hamilton is one of the best drivers in the world.
Yep. Agreed.
Not
I
saying the
think
best.
I've been saying it pretty much in every podcast we've done since that first Silverstone race,
Yep.
where I think I was saying the difference between Hamilton and Bottas was that Hamilton's able to look after his tires so much better. I'm not really sure what's going on with Bottas yesterday. He was just not finding any grip.
Yeah.
I don't know what the engine getting hot warning on his dash was about. I don't know how engine could get hot there. It was so cool.
To be honest, the kind of the vibe I get from the entire Mercedes garage Toto, I just cringe every time they talk, and I think I wouldn't put it past them to give Bottas unequal equipment for the race. I'm not I don't I know this sounds really um biased or whatever, but I don't care. It's
Well, there was a
impossible.
hint of that in his in his pit stop, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Or his second pit stop when he wanted
they
to go
don't
for
they don't give
softs.
they don't give him what he wants. I don't think they're giving him equal equipment. I think they're doing everything in their power to make sure Hamilton gets handed that seventh title on a platter.
Yeah,
Oh,
I agree with
you
you.
started off this point with, "Oh, Hamilton is great,"
He's good.
and now
He's one of the best, he's one of the best drivers in the world. But does he right now? But does he deserve to be on the same pedestal? I mean, if you remember that scene from Harry Potter where Harry, how dare you stand where he stood? I mean, it's the same thing.
We know you played Harry Potter yesterday. It's fine.
No, but I'm a huge fan of the books and the movies. But anyway, you know what I mean.
Okay.
For all of you who don't know what I'm talking about, go watch the seventh movie when Harry gets back into Hogwarts. But yeah, never mind.
Not watched any of them.
But anyway, who do you? Okay, let's move to some highlights. I think we're reaching the
I do agree
45.
with you, by the way, on that point about Hamilton. Yes.
Yeah, I think we're reaching to the end of the podcast. I mean, towards the weaning. My brain really is malfunctioning today. We're reaching towards the latter part of our podcast. So let's move to some highlights. So I think um to summarize my favorite few moments, I think it was definitely Leclerc fighting his way back after dropping positions at the start. I mean, we didn't really talk about Leclerc too much, but if you think about what he is doing in that Ferrari, it is nothing short of miraculous. I mean, we spoke about the
Absolutely.
Renaults, about Perez, about Stroll, but we missed out the golden boy right now, at least the
Yeah.
way people look at him.
No,
Uh,
Leclerc for me is genuinely probably the driver of the season so far. I'd say along with Perez and Gasly,
Perez, I
maybe, but
wouldn't agree
slightly
with.
ahead.
Perez, I wouldn't agree with because he's been matched by his teammate in quite a few Grand Prix.
No,
Um,
he's the only driver apart from Hamilton to score points in every race this year that he's taken part in. The only driver other than Hamilton.
okay,
Ricardo as well.
No, only Hamilton and Perez.
No, it's not Perez and Hamilton. It's Hamilton and Ricardo. I
What are you talking?
believe you
No,
got.
every race that Perez has taken part in, he's scored points this year. That doesn't apply to Ricardo.
No, okay, never mind. Leave it. Ignore
yeah,
me.
but I think Vettel said something yesterday, and this coming from four-time world champion who is not going to admit that he's easily beaten, especially with an ego with the size of Vettel. But either way, um, he said that he's getting the same equipment as Leclerc. And
Yep.
he himself admitted the way Leclerc's driving is on a different league. Right now, Leclerc is consistently 6 to 7 tenths, a minimum of 6 to 7 tenths quicker than a four-time world champion.
Yeah.
If Leclerc was in Ferrari in 2017 or 2018, Hamilton would not be on 6 world titles. He'd be on 4.
Interesting take on that.
Yeah.
No,
Considering,
I agree.
alright.
Yeah, I think Leclerc genuinely is in a different league right now.
I think the only two drivers who can be compared right now are Leclerc and Verstappen on a
I
different level.
agree.
On a different level.
Mm.
I still feel that Leclerc, and I am biased, so don't quote me on this, but I do believe
I'd
Leclerc
probably put a bit of Russell in that mix too. I think he's outdriving that car
too little,
just
too
as much
too
as
little.
Leclerc is outdriving the Ferrari.
I think too little of a data set. You can't. I
Yeah, we
can't.
haven't seen him race too much. We haven't seen him react to the pressure on the front. So yeah, I agree
Yeah,
with Manu there.
I would love to. I do
Mm.
think I do believe Russell has a lot of potential. You have heard me in the past saying you put him in that Mercedes, he would take Hamilton on, but
Yep.
it's purely speculation. But I think if you look at Leclerc versus Verstappen on the grid right now, I'm torn. I think both of them are incredibly quick drivers, but I am biased towards Leclerc. I am a Ferrari fan. There's no two ways about it. Being a sporting fan, you are always biased, whether you admit it to yourself or not. I think Leclerc's mentality, number one, his maturity and his pace is slightly edges Verstappen right now. But I just hope that we can see them in equal cars and see them fight at least next year once the new regulations come out in 2022.
Okay. Well, now that we're on Ferrari, let me be the one to also make a point about Vettel, and I do think he genuinely had a great race yesterday. After a very long time, I genuinely liked his performance.
Well, it was not bad in any way, but
I mean, any
he said
driver who
himself.
finishes 5 positions up from where he started, you would say that's a decent performance in any
No,
case.
that's the thing. That's not what he said. And if you had a look at his post-race reaction, he said that, well, yeah, I got a point, but he wasn't really too thrilled with it, considering, well, he did a lot more before, because he keeps constantly like, and that's kind of exactly what you expect from Vettel. Like, he's always comparing himself to the better driver in the team right now.
Yeah.
Um, but having said that, yeah, his performance was not lackluster in any way. He did did play the good boy in bringing home 1 point for the team.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not really focused on what points he got, but I'm comparing him to, I guess, the Vettel we've seen in the last 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 races, where he's sort of stuck in that, Haas Alpha Williams out of the top 10 area. Yeah. So he did genuinely make overtakes yesterday. He was genuinely fighting up until the very end. I think he was pushing until he had that massive lockup behind Ricardo. He was gaining on him too. I just look at it as a great positive. It's good to see that he's still got it in him
Yeah.
in terms of pushing or wanting to push.
Completely agree. And by the way, on Leclerc, he has now overtaken Perez in the championship. He is 5 points behind fourth placed Ricardo. I can't wait to see this boy in a good in championship winning car, because then it's not going to be a fight. It's not going to be a fight. Anyway, moving on from my fanboy moment. I'm not a fanboy,
Mm.
just passionate. But yeah, I think Renault. I think, just to summarize Renault's performance, yesterday, I think they maximized a bad situation. I don't see them anywhere above eighth, and I think the reason I said they weren't on pace was not because they weren't they didn't have decent performance, is because they were easily the fourth best car in the previous, or third best car in the previous few Grand Prix, behind Mercedes and Red Bull. So I was a bit disappointed by them. We already discussed this, but I think, just to sort of summarize it, they were, I think, the fourth of, so about the fifth best car yesterday in race trim. Disagree? Agree? What are your thoughts?
Renault being the
I,
fifth best car.
Yesterday, yes. And that's what I meant by a drop in
Mm.
performance, not necessarily the fact that they were slow, but they were slow as compared to their advantage over the other cars in previous Grand Prix.
yeah, it looked like the car wasn't suited for this track. I just
Yep,
want to chalk it off to the track itself because
yep,
the drivers themselves did nothing wrong, right?
sure.
Um,
Yeah.
I think
Let me
for
mention one
me,
thing about. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Apple.
I think for me, stellar performance would be from Science and Kimi. He had an amazing start. He did, um, yeah, that lap one was just one of the best. I think one of the highlights of the season. To be looking at a McLaren lead after lap one or lap two was simply outlandish and
Not just
outrageous.
lead, it was P1, P3, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Science and Norris. Yeah.
so it's a really exciting time to be a fan of McLaren, especially considering they're going to have even more performance under their belt come the start of next season. But yeah, even throughout the race, they held their own. They didn't fall back too much. I think all in all, a great finish for both McLaren drivers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to mention something about Renault before we moved ahead. I'm really surprised no one's spoken anything about the second fantastic wheel-to-wheel battle we had yesterday. We've spoken about Sainz and Kimi, but what about Perez and Ocon?
And what
That was
about
pretty much an entire lap
and I
of
think
wheel-to-wheel racing.
Gasly and Ricardo as well had a bit of a fight.
Yes, that was only for a few corners though. It was not. It was not very long sustained, but
I believe Ocon is a very, very good driver. I think he's clean, he's quick, quick enough for a good second driver. I'm never going to put him on the likes of Ricardo or any
yep.
first driver in a team, but he's a great supporting driver to have. Kind of like Felipe Massa was to Kimi in 2007. And
Mm,
yeah, I think
okay.
Yep.
even if you look at Alonso's comments in 2017, I believe, when they went wheel to wheel, several times, Ocon and Alonso, and Alonso said nothing but great things about Ocon. He's a good driver, wheel to wheel, respectful driver.
Yeah. Another point I wanted to make about that fight, Ocon and Perez, was I'm not sure if any of those were having memories about their days back in Force India, going wheel to wheel, if they were reminded of that at all.
They couldn't do it
But
on
it
the
was,
same team.
which is why for me it was great fun to see both of them going wheel to wheel.
They couldn't do it on the same team, but they did it now.
Yeah, absolutely. Keeping it clean when they're not in the same team.
We may see the same thing with Leclerc and Vettel next year.
No, definitely not. Not at the at the Nurburgring.
Okay, let's see. Uh, but
That
yeah,
was hilarious for me. It was like it was just letting him go, and he still crashed into him.
yeah, yeah. And I think now let's. I think Gasly's had some rumors to. And now since we're on the topic of Gasly and the Renaults, and uh, Gasly is rumored to be chasing the Renault seat. Do you think he's going to leave AlphaTauri after his performances? I don't see Ocon moving at all in before 2022, before 2023 or 2024 actually. I don't see the team being displaced at all. Do you think Gasly will ever leave that AlphaTauri?
Mm, I'm not
I
too
think he very
sure.
well might, right? I mean, given how his performance has been this year, I'm pretty sure a lot of teams have noticed it.
Yeah, but is there a seat available? I'm, I might be missing something here. But isn't Alonso taking that seat?
No, it's Alonso and Ocon. Mara's mentioning Ocon's seat. I did hear, I think, one of the commentators yesterday, before the start of the race, I think the rumors were that Gasly is eyeing for that seat, uh, Ocon's seat at Renault for next year.
Wait, so his contract is not renewed yet.
Ocon, no, he only had a 1 year contract. He doesn't have a.
Oh,
I don't
interesting.
think he has a renewal yet sorted.
What do you guys think of Ocon to the Red Bull and Gasly to Renault?
That's wow.
No,
That's a bit
no,
of a
no,
stretch there.
yeah.
That won't happen for multiple reasons. Ocon, I think, is still
That's
under contract with Mercedes. He's on loan from
yeah.
Mercedes, if I'm not wrong. Yep. Finally, let's move on to driver of the day and not your driver of the day. Couple, let's start with you.
Yes.
Mm, driver of the day, Kimi. Like,
Kimi.
I don't care what you guys say. I haven't smiled so much for
Yeah.
being a Kimi fan for the entire of probably last 1.5 years since he last won the US Grand Prix. So I am elated with his performance. Not driver of the day, probably would be Stroll.
Yeah. I okay, Black Sheep.
Okay, so this is difficult for me because I have two choices for both. So for me, driver of the day would be tied between Leclerc and Perez, and not the driver of the day would be tied between I think Stroll and Bottas.
Yep. Okay. For me, not driver of the day is a close competition. I think Latifi was miles behind his teammate in performance. Stroll also, but I'm going to give it to Stroll because not only did he manage to take out one car or nearly take out one car or take himself out rather, not only did he get multiple penalties, he just
Yeah,
was. I mean, Racing Point wanted to retire him from the race just because they thought he was going to cock it up even
That's
more.
that's what they did at the end, wasn't
Yeah,
they
it?
did that.
that they did that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm. It was ridiculous to see Stroll. Yes, it was an absolute joke.
Did you guys hear Martin Brundle's commentary as he saw him being retired?
What did he
Did you
say?
take note of it? Okay, so he pulled into the pits and Brundle mentioned that obviously they're retiring the car to save, if you don't finish the race, then you have another race to take that, change your gearbox, how many races you can do with the same equipment and all that stuff. But that only applies to, that was interesting, that was a new learning thing for me. That only applies if you have a legitimate reason for retirement. So a team cannot just pull the driver in and say, okay, we're not willing to race him further. So I think Brundle mentioned that it'd be interesting to see what reason they come up with for this one. And they asked Otmar Safna on the pit wall, and I think his reason was, the floor was slightly damaged and we were getting vibrations and whatever. And I was like, nah, that's
Yeah.
not the reason, is it?
Even he's laughing. You can almost hear him
Yeah.
laughing, right? Okay, that reason.
Uh, yeah. And for me, my driver of the day would go to. It's a good screen to be on in terms of the order because I can go through it. I'm caught between Gasly, Perez, Gasly and Perez. Gasly, Perez, and Leclerc. I think Leclerc required race, so I'm not going to give it to him.
Yeah, Perez definitely coming back from the back of the grid again.
I
That's a
think
good
I
choice
think it
for him.
has to go to Perez because he spun out dead last, fought his way back up, conserved his tires while making a lot of overtakes, going wheel to wheel with a lot of drivers. Kept his tires in the right window for a long, long time. It's easy to do that when you're sitting
Yep.
behind another driver and waiting for their tires to die. Read a certain
Yep.
gentleman in a silver arrow. But um, I think he did it while going wheel to wheel. He was quick. He was composed. He left space, respectful, fought his way up
Yep.
to sixth position from there, and incredible race by him. Incredible race. He would have been an
Sixth or
easy
seventh, actually, not
sixth,
sixth.
seventh, right? Sainz was sixth.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think he would have been P4 or maybe even P. I think he would have fought Verstappen because the Perez was the fastest man on the grid, Hamilton aside, and even Hamilton wasn't matching him at one point. So I think he would probably have challenged Verstappen for that podium if he had not been spun out.
Yeah, I won't disagree. I think he was definitely at least on form for P4.
Definitely P4, maybe P3.
Maybe MP3, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, Perez my driver of the day. Stroll, teammates. One best, one was. Yeah, I just realized after.
I was mentioning to my girlfriend yesterday while watching the race, saying that I had almost started to kind of move to the other side of the camp on Stroll, like just give him a bit of room, just benefit of doubt and whatever, and maybe start to appreciate him a little bit more this season. But then he does this,
Just that, yeah.
and it's not just like one incident. It's like it's the entire weekend marred by so many different things, from the practice session to not just having his car within the track limits, even after he's shown black and white flags and given warnings, and then he, I don't know what was going on with him. A conversation I'd like to hear was what he said to his dad after he got back in.
How much money
Yeah,
how much money have I cost you now? It's okay.
yeah. His dad probably just sends him an email every day. This is how much you're costing me today. The email of the day to start with.
Yeah.
BlackSheep, your driver and not the driver.
I mentioned it, right? I said Leclerc Perez tied for driver of the day. I'd probably give it to Perez. Yes, I agree. Fighting from the back of the field, and for me it was Bottas and Stroll. I think. I don't know what the hell was happening with Bottas. That's a very underwhelming performance.
I think there's more to it
He
than
did have
meets
the
the
one
eye.
lap pace, but he just does not have it at all.
I think
For
there's
an
more to
entire
it than
race.
meets the eye, though. I don't think Mercedes are being completely fair to him. It's impossible to see such a drop off because Bottas is traditionally known for being better in on his tires, not than Hamilton, but at least not being shit on his tires. He's always been quite decent.
Maybe they just turned down their engine. Just was Mercedes just could have just that could have been the directive itself, like not to put him on the soft tires, put him on the hards, take it, just bring the car home. We've got an easy one to why bother wearing the car out? That that very well might have
Well,
been
yeah,
the case as well.
but then it was too late by then, wasn't it? I mean, he was dropping a second a lap before that. I mean, in the first stint, he started to drop. I think after about 20 laps, after Hamilton went past, he was just dropping a second a lap to Hamilton, or at least 7 or 8 tenths.
No, that's exactly my point. Like maybe they thought, okay, if this is going to be the order at this point in the race, stop fighting, let it go, just bring the car home. I'm just saying it's a conspiracy theory, but I kind of believe it considering how amazing Bottas was
I
until
don't
the
think they
end
would
of.
do that. If you remember, Verstappen was about at some point what 8 or 9 seconds, 7 seconds behind Bottas.
Yeah, that's a
Why would they keep
lot of
saying?
seconds.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think Mercedes would risk that,
Okay.
especially knowing how good Verstappen can be on his tires in managing them.
And that's precisely why they were toning it down so that they probably have more to give at the end of the race.
Yep. And did you notice
Yeah.
how cold Bottas's tires were when he came out of the pits? That's not normal. He was slower.
Oh yes, his hards were very cold.
I
Yeah.
genuinely think that Mercedes are trying to fuck him up as much as possible. Forgive my grammar, but I'm not kidding here. This is too much for one driver because Bottas a is not that bad a driver. It could be I'm talking about conspiracy theories here. 9/11 was an inside job. That's fine.
I don't know who to believe now.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, I'm not saying he's the best driver. I'm not saying he would have beaten Hamilton either way, but I don't think Mercedes are giving him all the bullets in the chamber that they're giving Hamilton.
Mm.
Hmm. Interesting.
Anyway,
Uh,
folks, that's it from us for today. Unless Black Sheep or Couple, you'd like to add anything extra, anything that we may have missed out so far on the race
I
review.
think the only thing I can think of that hasn't been spoken about, sort of, it's not really a massive point of discussion, but it was interesting to see how the softs weren't working for anybody yesterday
Yeah,
in the second stint. Not
yeah.
for Ocon. Who else went on softs? Not for Gasly again, as well. He went on softs again, did he not? I'm not sure what his second tires were.
I don't
I think
think
they
he
were
picked
softs.
twice.
He did pit twice.
Huh.
Rebel.
But
That's. I was complaining about that. Remember? Rebel keep pitting him for no reason. I think that's what they did yesterday again to pit him onto softs to see how they would perform. Anyway,
I don't know.
yeah, softs were
He
just
didn't.
not getting in.
Yeah, it was definitely a bad tire to be on, but those mediums were simply amazing because what Raikkonen pit lap 10 and did 56 laps on those medium tires. So that's, I don't know. This track was simply suited for the medium tires, and that kind of put a very weird twist in the tail.
Mm.
Yep. And
Yes.
I've never seen a gap between two sets of tires than I have yesterday. It was insane how much better the medium tires were than both of the other compounds in the race.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And on that note, thank you so much for joining us for the 8th edition of Paddock Piss. Yeah, stick around because we've got Great League Racing back again after the Indian festivities. We're back again for Spa in ACC on Thursday. And what is it for our F1 boys this weekend?
Yep. And if you missed it, please do
Austria.
tune. It's Austria, but if you missed it, please tune in to the special event we had last weekend on Saturday, which was our very own promotional event, taking a page out of Codemaster's book. So go ahead and watch that. We called it Pace Off. All the drivers went head to head in a head to head format. So let us know if you enjoy it.
Yep. Cool.
Alrighty then.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.